Hi, David. Are we live? Am I starting? Hi, I'm Helen Walsh, the president of Diaspora Dialogues. We're delighted that you've joined us for this evening's event, which is part of Watts Toronto's Word Across Canada series and DD's Talk Toronto Symposium. If you've enjoyed the Watts Toronto programming so far, please like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a live stream. The Word on the Street, or Watts for short, is a festival of books, ideas, and imagination, but also more than a festival. Watts is a community. Diaspora Dialogues supports writers to turn their craft into a career through mentorship, professional development, and opportunities to present and publish their work. For 15 years, ever since DD's launch, we've partnered with Word on the Street to present emerging and established writers across diverse and Indigenous communities. We're delighted to partner with them again this year in this innovative new format. As we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that Watts Toronto operates on land that is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. This territory is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Anishinaabeg and Allied Nations to care for and share the resources around the Great Lakes in peace. Takarano is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people with long histories on this land. We are privileged to live, work, and create in this territory and strive to act with awareness and solidarity. We encourage you to educate yourself about the land you occupy, wherever you're tuning in from. Before I invite the panelists onto this broadcast, a few upcoming events from Watts Toronto. Tomorrow night, Tuesday, September 22nd at 7 p.m., please tune in for a celebration of the 2020 Trillium Book Award for Fiction in partnership with the Kingston Writers Fest. The panel will be moderated by Ali Hassan of Stand Up and Canada Reads fame in conversations with finalist Zalika Reed-Benta, who in addition to being an author is also program manager for Diaspora Dialogues, Martha Bailey and Seth, and Winna Tea Matonji. This coming weekend, DD is partnering with Word on the Street Toronto to produce 3 events on Saturday and 1 on Sunday, featuring a great lineup of writers, including Lubrin, Salima Nawaz, Andrew Piper, Suvankan Tomavanska, nominated for this year's Scotiabank Giller Prize, and debut writers Shun King, Faye Gunther, and Francesca Ituasi, who's also been nominated for the Giller. Details are available on the Word on the Street Toronto website. I see they've just flashed it as well, and on DD's website and Eventbrite. Now it's my delight to introduce Guillermo Verdecchia and Sarena Parmar, who work together as dramaturge and playwright, respectively, in DD's Playwrights in Residence program. Guillermo is a writer of drama, fiction, and film, a director, dramaturge, actor, and translator whose works have been seen and heard on stages, screens, and radios across the country and around the globe. He's a recipient of pretty much every award for theater, including the Governor General's Award for Drama, a 4-time winner of the Chalmers Canadian Play Award, a recipient of the Dora and Jesse Awards, and sundry Film Festival Awards. Sarena Parmar's The Orchard After Chekhov is an adaptation of Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard, told through the lens of a Punjabi-Sikh family in the Okanagan Valley. Inspired by the playwright's own childhood, this fresh adaptation confronts life, loss, and the Canadian immigrant experience with humor and beauty. The Orchard After Chekhov premiered at the Shaw Festival and was developed through the DD residency program, and has just been published by J.G. Shillingford Publishing. Please give them a warm welcome, and over to you both.
Thank you, Helen.
Thanks, Helen.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Sarena.
Hi, Guillermo.
That was a lovely introduction from Helen. I feel like she gave all the secrets away. I'm not quite sure what we're going to discuss now, but I'm sure we can figure something out.
No, let's go.
Much better. Let's go. Yes. Let's go do something that's not socially distanced. How are you, Sarena? And where are you?
I'm good. I'm in Niagara-on-the-Lake, which is the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabeg, and Neutral Nations. So I'm here right now doing a bit of writing.
Are you there as part of the Shaw Festival company, or just?
I was there, yeah. So I was part of the acting ensemble this year, and they kept us on over the summer doing kind of online content and different things like that, which ended at the end of August. So I thought I'd stay a couple extra weeks and get some writing done and make my own little writing retreat.
Oh, nice, great. Well, we'll talk about what you're working on eventually. But the occasion today is the Orchard, which, as Helen mentioned, had its premiere at the Shaw Festival, the prestigious Shaw Festival. It's not many a first-time playwright that gets their play produced at the Shaw. So let's talk about the Orchard a bit. Tell me and tell us. It's based on, or it's inspired by, or comes from Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard. Why? What are the roots of this adaptation, revision, transplantation of yours? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I had studied the Orchard after Chekhov, the Cherry Orchard, the real name, in theater school. I went to the National Theater School, and we had done that as one of our third-year productions, and I played Dunyasha, who's a servant in the household. And so we kind of did that play and finished it, and I graduated. And about a year later, I grew up in the Okanagan on an orchard. My family grew soft fruit and apples and cherries and strawberries and lots of different things. And that orchard had been in our family since we moved here from India in the 60s. My family had been farmers and orchardists for many, many, many generations from Punjab, India, which is kind of the agricultural, like, breadbasket of India. Everyone there farms. Anyway, so a few years after I had graduated from theater school, my mom called to say that they cut down the orchard. And I remember being just really taken aback. She said, me and my brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles, went out with chainsaws and they cut down the orchard. My grandparents were getting too old to take care of it, and all the kids, like my mom's generation, had gone into office jobs. So they kind of had achieved their Canadian dream because the kids didn't have to work the land anymore. And when that happened, I was like, oh my God, that's what the Cherry Orchard is about. I get it. Like this closing of a chapter and this kind of whole new world. The Cherry Orchard is set during the Russian Revolution, so the end of serfdom and the beginning of kind of a Russian middle class. Because for me, at least, when mom called to tell me that, I was like, oh, wow, we're not farmers anymore. That was kind of our last tie to India, because like I don't speak Punjabi. I've only been back once a few years ago. All our family resettled to the Okanagan. So the last kind of link we had to the motherland was our occupation. And now we don't have that. So yeah.
Right. Okay. Wow. There's a lot to pick apart or unpack there. So let's start. So there's a significant difference between your story and the Cherry Orchard, and one is that it, to some extent, your family story is the story of a kind of, can we say, mobility, a kind of success, or they, as you said, they achieved a certain Canadian dream. They moved on from working the land. They had jobs in the city, or that sort of thing. Whereas the family in the Cherry Orchard, this aristocratic family, the Cherry Orchard it no longer serves, and they are incapable of making it work. And in fact, it's being foreclosed on them, isn't it? So it's the end. It's before the revolution. It's 1904 or 1903, if I recall correctly, something like that. So, but it's definitely this period of change in Russia at the time, and it's the end of this era. So there's that similarity between their story and your story. But for them, it's something they're not, it's something they don't want to go through. Whereas it sounds like your family, this was a choice or a decision, or was it a positive? Is there something positive in your family story in this decision to cut down the orchard?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of bittersweet. Like, as I was interviewing family members, my grandparents saw it as a really great and beautiful thing, because they had achieved what they came to Canada to achieve, which is their kids were working in hospitals and government offices and things like that. And then when I spoke to my mom's generation about it, there was a lot of melancholy because they had so many childhood experiences there, and it was more sentimental for them. So I think that was, though, the biggest difference between the adaptation and the original. Like, the hardest thing for me to wrestle with was, like you were saying, this aristocratic family kind of does nothing. And that's why they end up losing the orchard, because they're just too busy being leisurely and not having to work. And they've never had to work before, being aristocrats. So when they're finally forced to or confronted with, hey, you need to do something, anything to save this orchard, they don't. And I thought, okay, if I'm drawing on my experience as an orchardist growing up in a farming family, everyone works so hard.
Right.
So that was kind of the biggest, like, transplant aspect of it, was like, how can I make this about a family that is working so hard so it feels authentic to Canadian farmers as I know them. And so now in the adaptation, they try everything they can, but just everything they try is not working.
Yeah. So that is you're absolutely right. That's a significant difference. And I do remember that being in our conversations around it, a challenge, that these are people who actually know how to run an orchard or a farm, as opposed to the Russian aristocrats who, it's not that they don't know how to work. They've never had to. So let's talk about that a bit. What was the context that you set your orchard in that kind of helps make sense of how they lose? Because in your version, they do lose the farm. How is it that happens?
Yeah. So I wanted to follow kind of the general plot of the original. So it's not exactly my family's story and why we cut down our orchard, but really pulling from the original. And I remember in the original, there's kind of just a passing line about how Grisha, the son of the family, the youngest son, drowned when he was 6 years old.
Right.
And then they kind of just brush over it. And I think, to drown at that age in Russia at that time was not that uncommon. Kids pass away. But I thought, well, if that happened in the 60s, that would be a much bigger deal and could break a family, the spirit of the family. So I kind of used that as the catalyst as to why things stopped working, and why maybe subconsciously or emotionally for them it's harder to save the orchard, because the mother deep down, who comes back from India after being away since the son died, just sees ghosts in the orchard, and so there's something holding her back from kind of going full tilt into saving it.
Right. So it's Loveleen in your play who she seems to be the one everybody kind of is counting on. Now that she's back from India, things are going to pick up for us, and we'll be able to rescue our orchard, which is threatened, isn't it? It's in your version. It's under. There's the threat of foreclosure, or there's the land. What was the political context in BC at the time with the land?
The
freeze.
The land freeze. I try to put such little information because it gets so convoluted, but it's like a very real thing for BC folks.
But it's exactly, it's based on, this is actually Canadian history. This is BC history. This is grounded in people's real lives, much as Chekhov's story was, but a very different context.
Yeah. So in the kind of story of the orchard, there's a grandfather and then a brother and a sister there, of that father, and then two daughters. So that's kind of the structure of the family. And they're facing foreclosure because they've had just a bunch of bad luck. Crops weren't working out. They made some bad business decisions, all that kind of thing. But something that was also happening at that time in BC in the 60s and 70s was the agricultural land freeze, which meant that the BC government was trying to make sure that farmland stayed designated as farmland, because a lot of people were selling their land to developers. And the kind of catch-22 to that is that's good because we get more green space and more land that's producing food for the country. But the flip side for the farmer is that most farmers, when they would retire and sell their land, that was their retirement policy. That was their kind of insurance plan. So they could sell for quite a profit to a developer and be able to retire. But if they have to sell it to another farmer, they really can't make much money because there's not a lot of money in farming. So the family is also kind of facing that dilemma in terms of how are we going to make this money to pay back the bank.
Where's it going to come from?
Yeah.
And that's the solution in the Chekhov version, right? It's we're gonna the sort of up and coming middle class figure, the upstart, the nouveau riche kind of, the businessman proposes, I know how we can save your cherry orchard. We can chop it up in little bits and parcel it out, and you can live off that. And of course, for the family, that's a horrific idea. But for him, it's good business. Is a similar, I mean, you've drawn on many of the plot elements. You retained a surprising amount of Chekhov's story in yours, and so there's the same figure occurs in the orchard. We have Michael, who's got his plan, and that is your variation on that was
yes, his plan, his brilliant plan is that they should cut down the whole orchard and then pave it over and make RV plots. But you can leave part of the orchard as an orchard. This is something that happened in the Okanagan more in the 90s, but Michael was ahead of his time in the 60s in the adaptation.
He was a visionary.
Yeah, exactly. But agro-tourism. So this happened up the street. What was the name of that? It was like the Apple Cart restaurant or something. Anyways, this happened up the street from me in the 90s, but they were in the agricultural land freeze. They needed to make money. They didn't want to sell the land. So they cut down most of the orchard and they made these RV spots. And so they'd rent it out to summer RVers. A lot of people would come up and through the summertime. They'd park it there. They'd get to have their RV in the middle of this orchard all summer. So it was very picturesque. And technically the orchard is still maintaining all the rules and regulations and restrictions of the land freeze because part of it is still a working orchard. So that's Michael in the adaptation's grand plan.
His very clever solution. We'll retain 10% as a working farm, and we'll be able to still call it a farm, etc. But we'll profit from the RVers who are going to want to come and do this. And of course, the family is appalled by his proposal, just as they are in Chekhov's version.
Yeah, I think too in this version, the more I kind of dug into it, they're also appalled because they're farmers in their blood. So to own all this land and to not farm it feels not right to the spirit or the soul, So they have an extra connection to that idea being bad. It's not just that it's a ridiculous idea to them, but
right. Oh, that's interesting. Because the Russian aristocrats have a very sentimental, a very emotional connection to this estate. It's as you said, it's where they grew up. They were children. They have all those memories that bind them to this. But in your play, one of the things I still find so kind of moving is people's attachment to the land through their work on it, through their effort. There's some beautiful. I wonder, do you have the text handy? Would you mind reading us a little chunk? Like when Gus is talking about, when he describes, he asks Michael to smell the air. He asks, "What do you smell?"
Yeah.
And his attachment to the land is so acute that he can actually distinguish different qualities of olfactory qualities in the air and the soil. Do you know the part I'm talking about?
Yeah. I've got it here.
Could you read the stats?
Yes. Helen's so smart. She was like, get a copy of the book. So
show us the book,
yeah,
everybody.
Exactly.
Like to see the book, show the money.
Thank God. Okay. Yeah. So this is Gurjeet speaking. He's the uncle in the family and kind of has been taking over looking after the farm since Loveline, his sister, has been away. So Michael has just kind of given his whole salesman pitch about why the agricultural RV park is the only way to go in order for them to save the orchard and make some money and not go bankrupt. And so then Gurjeet responds with this. He says, "Tell me, Mr. Lopakin, when you walk up to the house, what do you smell?" And Michael says, "Fresh air. No, actually just tractor grease." And Gurjeet says, "Well, I can smell the dirt. And not just any dirt. This is morning dirt. Smells musty, like clay. And when I walk back to the house for dinner every day, the last thing I smell is the sunset dirt. Smells like an earthworm that's been baking in the sun with his swim trunks all day. But my favorite is the midday heat. It's dry and hot, and the dirt smells like the fuzz of a peach. We are farmers, my friend, like my father and his father before him, not some businessman. May not be glamorous work to someone like you, but my heart gets weary if I'm not up at the crack of dawn.
Yeah, gorgeous. Yeah, I just love that working so closely, working so hard, you would develop this kind of acuity that you could parse different qualities of soil through your nose, that you could distinguish different times of day and so on. That speaks to a real closeness to that earth, which would make it very difficult to pave over and set up RV plots.
Yes.
Yeah. But of course, let's just give it away for us. What happens in your version of the play? What is it that actually occurs?
So I'm trying to think what happens in the original. They go to auction, and Lepakin wins it at the auction. And in this one, and I remember too, we had a lot of conversations about this because you were like, this is not clear and this could be too much. But I was like, no, I think we can do it. In this version, I've added an extra scene that's not in the original at all. And it's where Loveline, the mom who's been away and comes back, who is kind of going through a grief and a re-traumatization, being back on the orchard because she's kind of never dealt with the son's death. So she has a scene with Michael just before the auction. And she kind of inadvertently, on purpose, half joking, but really wants to sell him the orchard. And so when they go to auction, it's already sold to Michael. And it's a big shock and surprise to the family and to Gurjeet, who is actually at the auction, hoping to bid on the orchard and win it at auction. And so it ends up being a kind of big betrayal to the family. And that kind of splinters them apart even further.
Yeah. And in the end, she's going to go back to India.
Yeah, she says she's going to stay and be there for her daughter. Her daughter's Annie and has missed her mother and has kind of grown up without her mother through her kind of preteen and teen years. Annie, the daughter's now around 20. And at the last minute, the mom says, I just can't be here. I'm not that woman anymore who I was before my son died. So I have to go. And so she kind of leaves, and Gurjeet, again, the brother, is left to pick up the pieces, and they all have to kind of start a new life and form new identities that are not to do with farming.
And there's another I remember very moving, especially watching it in rehearsal and then seeing the production. But near the end of the play, where Gurjeet, he's now going to work in a bank, right?
Yeah.
And he has had to cut his hair.
Yeah.
Can you just describe that for us? It's quite something, that moment.
Yeah. So the family's Sikh. So for those of you that don't know, you probably noticed they wear the turbans. Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, is a Sikh gentleman. So Gurjeet and Kesser, the grandfather, both wear turbans. And because they've been working on the orchard in this small town, they've been able to kind of keep their faith, their articles of faith, intact because they are the bosses. But when the orchard is cut down, he has to get work elsewhere. And the only way he can get a job off the orchard is to assimilate and cut his hair. So we see him with his full turban and everything and beard in Act 3. And then when you see him in Act 4, he just walks in clean shaven and with very short hair. And he just kind of says, I got a job at the bank. And the sister feels pretty bad, and she says, don't worry, it'll grow back. And he just says, not at the bank.
Not at the bank, right. It can't grow back. And if I recall, in production, there was a moment where we saw him without his turban, wasn't there? Did we see his long hair at some point?
Yeah. At the end of Act 1, when the kind of family's going to bed, and it's just him and Barbara, who's kind of a cousin, who's been joined the family fold almost as a sister to Annie, the other daughter. They're kind of trying to work things out and finally kicking their feet up at the end of this kind of RV pitch and commotion in the house. And yeah, he takes off his turban and kind of undoes, there's a knot at the top called a jura. He undoes that, and you kind of see his long hair, because I wanted to also kind of demystify and make a really intimate moment where people could see, what I get to see, what my grandfather does when he comes out of the shower. And so you also know, the audience or the reader has like a real visual picture in their head, or actually seeing it in person, of the hair, so that when it's cut, they feel that loss,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely felt that. It's so, I mean, it's so clear when you see that glorious hair and you see the turban and the care that's taken to wrap it and so on. And then at the end, and especially when that simple line of, not at the bank, it's not going to grow back. I can't grow back. And this connects to another kind of assimilation narrative in the play, to the character, and also one that's about faith, and that is Barminder, or Barbara, in the play, right?
Yeah.
And that's a whole new strand. That's something that's entirely yours. Chekhov there's no Chekhov in this. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So in the original, that character is called Varia, and people kind of always just joke she looks like a nun, she acts like a nun.
Right.
And I was like, oh God, how am I going to recontextualize this? I could always just delete it, but I always tried to keep things in as much as I could. And I remembered that my grandmother's sister, because everyone had moved from India to the Okanagan, was taken in by this family that really helped raise her. And now that grandma's kids call the people that took her in like grandma and grandpa, like very close. And anyways, and they were very Christian, and Kelowna, the Okanagan, is very Christian. And so to fit in, you kind of had to, we celebrated Christmas, and you kind of walk this fine line of, I have my faith, but then this other faith is the culture, right? It's not like there's the culture and the faith separate. So for those of you that don't know, especially in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, Canada, the Okanagan was like 98% Caucasian or white. So anyway, so I wanted to explore what would happen if I took that further. So Barbara in this play is really looking for community, and she's feeling very alone and isolated, and starts spending more time at the church and starts making friends there. And I had friends who did this too growing up. They'd kind of say like, hey, you should read this part of the Bible, or like, have you ever thought about come to this, I don't know, I don't want to speak out of turn. Like they have the youth nights at the church, come to this youth night. And so I thought, well, what if Barbara just gets really seduced by that, because she's so lonely and so desperate to fit in and assimilate. But deep down for Barbara, in this play, she's devoutly Sikh. Like she really believes and dreams of Gurdwara and the Golden Temple, and so it's a real conflict. And when she ends up converting to join the Presbyterian Church, it really costs her soul, essentially, because she can't have the faith that speaks to her.
Right. Yeah. I wonder if you could read us that a little bit of that, maybe in the scene with what's his name, the driver,
with Yash.
With Yash,
Yes.
Right at the very end of that because it's quite beautiful, because Yash is this kind of he's a kind of a guy. He's you feel like he's just a bit of a jerk, and he's just a guy who's just interested in kind of flirting and having his way with women. But actually, he's deeply sensitive to what she goes through. He understands, and he's in three little lines. We understand that he's also sold something of his soul, or something to get by. I wonder if you could find that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I didn't know this, that you yourself had sort of been invited to church evenings. Do you think that was, just to speculate, do you think that was just social on your friends' part, or do you think they were worried about your soul?
Well, I had friends, and again, this was a time and living in a majority white Christian community, but I remember being on the school bus with friends who came to my birthdays, and we went trick-or-treating together and all that kind of thing. I think we were in our teens, and we were just talking on the bus about some episode of Buffy or something, because we were teenagers. It was the 90s. And then out of nowhere, they just kind of said sometimes it just makes me really sad, because I know that your soul's going to hell. Wow. Yeah. And I was like, well, it's okay. I might feel okay. But we just kind of dropped it and moved on. But it was really pervasive because there was just no thinking in anyone's head that there could be something different, because anyone that wasn't white was a minority, like severe minority, right? Like wrapped up in that 3% is an Indigenous population. And
of course, yeah.
Try and flip here.
I can't remember. I can't give you a page number, but you probably know better than I where it is. Have you found it?
Yes. Do you think we should read this like it's like a page and a half? Should I read this?
Yeah,
just
maybe.
Parts of it, do you think?
Yeah, just maybe parts of it, and give us a bit of the context. What's happened?
Yeah, so Barbara's alone. Goodness, need a little water.
Go to. I'll take this moment to remind folks who have joined us that if you have questions or thoughts, you can put them in the comments section and they will be forwarded to us, and I can grill Sarena on your behalf. If you have any challenging questions for her, we're happy to take those.
I'm ready. I think I ate a nut earlier.
Oh, you swallowed a cherry pit like
yeah, exactly.
like Michael in your play.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
You all right?
Anyways, yes. So Barbara has run into the orchard to be alone. There was kind of a racist incident that happened on the family orchard, and she's taken the Gutka, which is like kind of your family's mini Sikh Bible. So she's taken that from the house and into the orchard, which is confusing because she talks about being Presbyterian now. And Yash comes across her and kind of, what are you doing here, and all that kind of stuff. And so then Barbara finally confesses, I got baptized today. So Yash, who's like, has no qualms of being assimilated, is like, yikes. And Barbara says, after the service, I invited Susan and the girls back to the house so we could celebrate and they could meet everyone. But the girls didn't want to come. They said it'd be more fun to go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, which they know I can't eat because I'm vegetarian. And I said, well, can't we just go to Denny's or something? But they really like the fried chicken and went without me. And when is it going to be enough? I wear their clothes. I eat their food. I pray to their God. I'm doing everything right. They lied, Yash. They did. And Yash says, their country, their rules. Barbara says, I know. And Yash says, well, you could try this shaggy haircut. Worked for me. And then he says, it means you try harder. And then the scene kind of ends with Barbara asking to take the Gutka back, the Bible back. And Yash says he will. And she says, take my kara too, which is kind of this religious bracelet that Sikhs wear and is one of our articles of faith. And she's trying to take it off, but it won't come off very easily. And she says, it's weird. I've never taken this off before. When I moved here, I thought I'd die and be reincarnated and have another chance at happiness, you know? Their country, their rules, right? And Yash just says, I'm not the guy to talk you out of this, Barbara. And he takes the bracelet and says, fine, your secret's safe with me. And then he leaves and she goes on to kind of pray in earnest to Jesus or God, Christian God, for the first time.
Right. Yeah, it's a lovely and I think very surprising, mini arc in your play. This this other layer of assimilation or of negotiation. We don't just have to trade our names. We also have to trade our hair and our appearance and our faith. Now they're born in Canada, those characters. Is that correct?
Yeah. I was interested in thinking about like who were the pioneers of Canada, and my family like wore flannel, and I knew how to two-step and grew up drinking Budweisers, and you know what I mean. Like we learned line dancing at school, and I went to the country bar and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, oh man, if I was just watching Murdoch Mysteries, I would never know that. I kind of wanted to just re-examine who we think of as being here for a long time. So that was important to me, why the kids, the generation of the Barbara who just converts and Yash are born in Canada. They have no accents. They're kind of straddling both these worlds in the 60s, which meant the family came in like the 20s.
Right. And so they are really in the middle. This play is set at the sort of birth of official multiculturalism. in some
Yeah.
ways. They're in this moment of renegotiation on another scale, on a kind of political scale, on a kind of legal scale, with the introduction of the multiculturalism policy and so on, and that sets off little things for the people in the play, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, something too, before we start talking about that, it was really interesting talking to South Asian friends of mine, their parents, who grew up in the city, because it was such a different experience than growing up in rural Canada.
Okay.
Rural Canada, or Kelowna's a bit rural. And like, we lost language within one generation, like, so many came and cut our hair, like, didn't really think twice about it. My grandpa's since grown his hair back, but for the city folks, they grew up like close to Indian grocery stores and having, Indian parties where like everyone from the neighborhood that was Indian came and brought a dish, and you know what I mean? They could really replicate some form of their culture from back home. And for me and my family, it was really just us. So that was something that it was just really surprising the more I talked to people, because they'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't understand this context.
Uh-huh. So it really just a question of numbers and of community, in a sense, right? Like in the city, you have maybe a kind of critical mass of Punjabi or of Indians, or
Yeah.
where you can sustain and support one another and maintain certain things.
Yeah.
Whereas
And
you were isolated in some senses, or your family.
yeah, so the pressure to assimilate is just,
greater.
I think, greater and kind of less questioned. Like, well, we just have to do this.
Right.
Because there's what are we hanging on to? There's nobody else here.
Right, of course. Yeah. Although, I mean, I'm just thinking there's a wonderful thing that you've done in the play is that it's there. Although the Basran family is if I recall correctly, the only Indian Punjabi group in the play, there are other folks who are kind of displaced, or we have our what's his name? Our Japanese Canadian.
Yabisaka.
Oh yeah, and of course we also have Charlotta, who in your play is called
Charlie.
Yes, Charlie. Right. So we have our First Nations rodeo queen, and they form a kind of community of, if you will, others in a way. Although in the play they are the center, they are the dominant, they are the narrative, and yet they're all under a different kind of pressure.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to find all of the misfits and all of the kind of non-dominant histories of the Okanagan and see where they intersect and things like that. So with the two Japanese characters, a lot of Japanese folks were interned in the Okanagan in the 40s and World War II. And then a lot of them ended up staying and buying farmland afterwards. So the NATOs were up the street from us. They had a big orchard, which is now a subdivision. But and they've stayed how many generations now? 3-4 generations. So they're there. And then Kelowna across the bridge is the West Bank First Nations Reserve. So that community is really close and kind of mingled in the Okanagan, and especially the Silks people had a really strong history in the rodeo. So again, when I was thinking of cowboys, and like we have the Merritt Mount Music Festival in the Okanagan, I think of like the white guy with the hat, and I was like, no, even that's not true. Like there were tons of First Nation folks riding horses, and it was important to me that was like visually represented and had a story behind it. And anyways, right. So just trying to kind of reframe when we're thinking about rural Canada, who was there and when and things.
Right, but because it's a very BC image, those figures that are represented in your play. You think, oh yeah, that's absolutely BC, and yet it's very rarely the center of the narrative or the heart of it. It's often a kind of local color or something, but you've flipped it all on its head. How I'm just curious, how similar was that to your experience, or was that to your family? Like, was there that kind of mixing going on, or are you inventing as a playwright there?
I think for sure Japanese and South Asian, tons of like mixing and checking in with each other and helping each other, because they were both in agriculture. They're both those communities owned orchards and farms, and so if you need help, if you need advice, if something's going funny with your tree, you kind of reach out to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like my mom still speaks really fondly of the NATOs and stuff like that. First Nations, I mean, I was more aware of them than I think most Canadians are when I talk to other people of my generation. Like we learned about them in school, and that history of the area and things like that. But, you know, just like the rest of Canada, it's a little bit more segregated. So it was just important for me to just kind of start to pull them in. But even Charlie in the play is kind of like this outside observer, which I think, at least to my experience, is just very true. Like, you know, having a completely different relationship to the land and to this community.
Right. And yeah, a very different sense of time and history too. And Charlie's quite, I mean, you've done a really surprising, I think, wonderful narrative. I want to say trick. It's not a trick, but a surprise at the end that I'm not going to give away. But Charlie does get the last word in your play, and I'm wondering, would you mind just reading Charlie's last piece? So at the end of the play, in Chekhov's version, the family is moving on. It's breaking up and moving in new directions, and some of those are maybe positive, and some of those are big question marks. And Charlie's left at the end of the play on this property. There's some sort of suggestion that maybe Michael is going to hire her and she's going to have a kind of job or future there. But her vision and understanding of that space and place is quite different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and this was after too, I talked a lot with the Silks Heritage Museum there, and just kind of about like, you know, just like we have central to the Sikh religion tenets and images and things like that. What is it for them? And anyways, so this is the Charlie's monologue here at the end. So she's left alone, and the house is being all locked up. You hear people driving away, and she's alone in this house. And Charlie says, my kawa, which is grandfather, my kawa told me a story once. Before there was an orchard here, before there was a ranch, there was a hill. And at the bottom of the hill, the great creek, filled with the biggest sockeye salmon in the entire Okanagan. In the summer, the creek used to run red with fish, bursting out of the water and overflowing onto the rocks. My great-grandfather was a salmon chief. People may come and go from this land, but the salmon is my brother, and I belong to this creek. And we hear a kind of a faint voice of Grisha, who's the son that passed away. And he says, and what happens next, Charlie? Where will you go? And Charlie says, I'll be right here.
Yeah. I'm just hearing that again. I'm reminded of like one of the things that I think is so marvelous about what you've done is you have this like in the original, there's this plot of land, this chunk of earth, this special place that is important to a group of people. But what you've done is you have kind of excavated the layers of importance and layers of relationship to the same space. Charlie said, before there was an orchard, there was this, and we were here, and the salmon were here. And then the Bosrans have a particular relationship to it that comes from working this land for several generations, and that is a memory of work they did in India and so on. And Michael has a different relationship to it, which is instrumental to some extent, and so on. And so there's this this wonderful complexity to this space that we all may recognize a space as important or as significant or in a particular way, but we have very, very different relationships to it depending on who we are, where we've come from, what we've done, what we believe.
Yeah, I think too, especially in a Canadian context, like, you know, the whole play, the original, is about who owns the land. Do you know, is Lepakan going to own this land? Do the Bosrans, in my case, own the land? And is it going to go to auction? Will the bank own the land? And I said, you just can't have this conversation unless we talk about Indigenous folks and the fact that they are the original caretakers and owners of this land. And so that was a really tricky thing to navigate, because I tried to be as respectful as possible. It's not a character I wanted to overwrite, because it's not my voice or my story, and do as much research as possible. But I didn't want to omit that perspective from the adaptation, because I think you were talking about land in Canada and history of land, and you just
how could you not talk about how could you not reckon with that history and that relationship? I think that's what I find so I mean, it's responsible, it's important, but I find her relationship to it so moving. Like, it just really shifts my way of looking at things, to go, oh wow, there's yet a whole much huger way of thinking about being in the world and being connected to place and space, that because of where I come from, because of who I am, I just haven't thought that way. And Charlie's voice really opens that up for us in the play. I just want to remind people, if you have any comments, any questions, to send them to us. We're approaching, not quite, the end of our time. And I mean, there's so many little things about the play we could talk about, but there's also, I remember we talked at one point and you were saying, I said, why are you staying so close to the original? Why are you this line is pretty much the line in Chekhov, and you've changed it just a tiny bit, but keep it in. I was like, we could lose this. We could move from here to there. And you, not only is this your story in a sense that you're drawing on you and your family's relationship to the Okanagan and to orchards and to land in this way, but it's also as an actor, your experience as an actor, as a person of color, informs why you wrote this, doesn't it?
I think for sure, in sticking so close to the structure and so close to he would be like, cut this line, you don't need it. Because in the original, it takes them 3 sentences to say something that today we would say and then I went to the store, something so short and succinct, And it was really important to me to keep that rhetoric, that style of speaking, so that it gave an opportunity to folks of color, BIPOC folks, to speak text like this, to speak classical Western text, and to figure out how I can speak for myself, how I can see myself in these stories within the classical Western canon, and to kind of affirm and plant my flag that I have a place here and others have a place here. And so that's why I wanted to keep it sounding a little bit heightened, a little bit formal, and really stick to that 4X structure. And, I think we found beautiful ways to add things and layer things. So it speaks to a different experience now, like an immigrant experience, but especially going to the National Theatre School and then, having the privilege to work at Stratford and Shaw and things like that. I wanted to make sure people who looked like me knew we belong there. We have a right to these places and to these stories if we want them. So.
Yeah. And I remember even you was talking about the shape of ideas, that sort of to prove that brown folks can handle ideas that are this length and this particular shape and sound this way, that's still somehow a kind of thing that needs to be proven.
I mean, yeah, it's sad to even say it, but I think so. And I think too, to have so that's kind of the sad part of it, is to prove, but then the other part of it too is the excitement to do language like that. I find that as an actor really exciting. It's muscular, and I don't speak like that in my life. So how can I get my thoughts to last that long and drive to the end of these long speeches? And, so it's a bittersweet thing, I suppose. But yeah, I think it's important. I do. But I really like these plays. Yeah. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, they're fascinating and they're gorgeous, some of them, and if they are sort of, as we're also often told, are patrimony in some way, or full of so-called universal importance, then surely they belong to all of us, and that means that we can all participate in them and embody them, right?
Yeah.
Not just that some people get to embody them and their universality speaks or reflects to the rest of us or something, right?
Yes.
So you got to do this, or you got to see this produced at Shaw, and you were in it, and it was directed by your husband.
Yeah.
How was that now so many months later? Can you speak about it?
What were we thinking? I don't even, it wasn't enough. Hey, so The Orchard is my first play. It's a 4-act play. It's like a long, big play with 12 people. So that in itself is a lot. Then to be produced at a large institution means there's a lot more people with hands in the pie. So then that's a lot to manage, just as a new playwright, trying to figure out those relationships and where I fit in all of that. And then come, my husband's South Asian, come, Ravi, come direct this play. We'd never worked together before, but he's a very good director, and he did an amazing job. So I would get him to direct it again. But wow, that was a big relationship learning curve. And then on top of that, oh, F it, I'll just be in it too. So it was a lot of work, and I'm really proud of the work that we did. I think, had it been my second play, had it been my second time doing any of those things, I think it would have been a lot less stressful. It was a lot of pressure, but here we all are.
You survived. Your marriage has survived. Yeah. And the show was beautiful. And I mean, kudos to the Shaw Festival for producing it. It was, great that they saw it and went, yep, this deserves to be on our stages. It's in our mandate. These are the kind of stories we want to tell. We want to do this version of it, and we want to do it with this cast and with these artists. And that was really gorgeous to actually, whether we like it or not, there is a kind of prestige that accrues to these places. And it's wonderful that prestigious institution said, yeah, this belongs here. There's no question about that.
Yeah. And I think too, higher production values, more audience attendance,
Sure.
All that kind of stuff. It helps it reach farther. And and when we were going through the research of the festival and talking about how do we want to talk about this play, we also realized I was the first South Asian playwright to be produced in the festival's history.
Right.
So, it was just all very very
amazing.
exciting.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Another first. Yeah, that's great. What? So you're there now.
Yes.
At Niagara on the Lake. Charming Niagara on the Lake.
Tinseltown.
Odd little place, but anyway, you're there and you're happy and you're working. What are you working on now?
Yeah, I'm working on the first draft of a new play about witches. So when I was younger.
You were also a witch when you were younger? Not only were you farmers, you were also
That's
a
right.
coven.
That's right, I was with my friends. It's like Buffy, The Craft, the 90s was heavy in the witch times. And we'd bury salt in the backyard and bless water and light candles and do all that kind of stuff. But I had completely forgotten about it until a couple of years ago. And I noticed the witch was kind of having this comeback. I thought, what is this fascination we have time and time again with the witch, and why is the witch demonized constantly? Ergo, what is it about women that society is so afraid of? That's kind of the question that I'm trying to explore. So I've been doing a lot of research about the witch trials and kind of setting it in Reformation-ish times.
In Europe or in North America?
I mean, I think that's where the ish comes in. It's more to set a set of circumstances that the witch trials are happening. They're prevalent. They're happening in these small towns. But there's no accents. People talk as they are. All the witches will be women of color, because I think there's kind of a parallel there between who we demonize and who gets to have power and freedom and is allowed to speak. So yeah, it's early days. I'm working on the first draft right now, but that's kind of where my head's at with it.
Great. Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just about to ask Helen to come back. Is there anything you want to put out there, Sarena, that we haven't mentioned? Is there is there a thought, a question, something that you?
No, I think you did such a good job, Guillermo.
Why, thank you so much. I think you did a very good job too. And here's Helen.
Thank you so much to Guillermo and Sarena for this terrific talk. I loved this play when I saw it at Shaw, and I'm really looking forward to reading in book form too. And so will all of you. Yes, copies of the book is available at the official Words Across Canada bookseller, which is Another Story Bookshop, available at anotherstory.ca. A reminder about tomorrow's 7 p.m. Watts celebration of the 2020 Trillium Book Award for Fiction in partnership with the Kingston Writers Fest. Again, the lineup includes Zalika Reed-Benta, Martha Bailey, Seth, Taya Matoni, and host Ali Hassan. And of course, Watts Toronto has a full lineup this weekend, September 26 and 27, of author talks, panel conversations, and readings. So please check out thewordonthestreet.ca for full details. Dee is delighted to partner on 4 of those presentations, as I said earlier, and details are either available on the Watts website or on diasporadialogues.com. Both Watts Toronto and DD are registered charities, so if you feel so inclined, you can help support Canadian writers through a donation to Word on the Street or to Diaspora Dialogues, available through the donate buttons on our websites. Many thanks to all of you for joining us, and I hope you have a great evening. Hope to see you at another event this week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.